President Marcos's close contacts like Executive Secretary Vic Rodriguez, Presidential Management Staff personnel, and Angeles were likewise tested negative in antigen test. Secretary Angeles even spoke to the media without wearing a mask.
By the way, just in case you're worried, negative ako ha. Thank you.
Because of his condition, the president won't be able to attend the 246th anniversary of independence of the United States at the U.S. Embassy in Manila. He will also attend virtually the meeting of leagues of governors and mayors on booster shot uptake. There were times these past few days when the president took off his mask, such as during his cabinet meeting last Tuesday and his press conference in the afternoon. This is the second time the president contracted COVID-19. The first was in 2020 when he was brought to the emergency room after he felt difficulty in breathing. Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere meanwhile says the president has to isolate himself for 7 days.
If a person is symptomatic, the antigen test will be accurate already. So we are just going to monitor the president, but of course the president would have that prerogative if his doctor would advise him to take his RT-PCR.
Angeles did not reveal during the press conference where the chief executive will be during his isolation. After 7 days, Vergere says he can return to work and hold face-to-face activities if he has no more symptoms. Rex Remitio, CNN Philippines.
The economic team of the Marcos administration sees a full recovery within this year despite surging prices of fuel, food, and other basic goods. Growth projections for 2022, however, have been lowered. Our Melissa Lopez is reporting live from the Finance Department's headquarters in Manila. Melissa, what are their latest projections?
Pia, that's right. The economic team expects full economic recovery from the pandemic by middle of the year, although the full year growth forecast has been reduced to 6.5% to 7.5%. Against 7 to 8% set in May. The Cabinet Level Development Budget Coordination Committee or DBCC says the lower growth outlook reflects the prolonged conflict between Russia and Ukraine, as well as supply disruptions that pushed prices of fuel and other basic. Total government spending is seen hitting 4.9 trillion pesos this year. The Budget Department says it is open to extending a fresh round of fuel subsidies to jeepney drivers and other public utility vehicles, farmers and fisherfolk, but they will have to see first if there's more funds available. Finance Secretary Ben Diokno adds fuel subsidies should end this year as world crude prices are seen to trend lower by 2023. Budget Secretary Mina Pangandaman says they have not received a request for more subsidies from the Transportation Department. The same goes for requested cash aid for farmers suffering from higher fertilizer costs. The biggest challenge for the new administration is its new goal to trim the poverty rate to just 9%, coming from 23.7% as of June 2021, or that's 1 in every 4 Filipinos considered poor. The budget deficit, or the difference between government spending and revenue collection, is also projected to return to 3% of GDP as early as 2026, coming from a wide gap of 8.6% of national output last year. The economic managers also concede that the rise in consumer prices are sure to breach their original 2 to 4% target band, instead projecting a 4.5 to 5.5% rate for 2022. Inflation is currently on a 3-year high at 6.1% as of last month, driven by surging fuel prices, which have also pushed the prices of food and other goods higher. Meanwhile, the team is finalizing the 2023 national budget worth 5.2 trillion pesos, which will be submitted to Congress by August 22nd. Priority spending areas are agriculture, infrastructure, and the power sector. Back to you, Pia.
Mel, 5.2 trillion pesos for 2023. Where does government plan to source additional funding? Isn't it worried about the growing debt?
Right, Pia. Stronger household consumption and investments are seen to boost the economy and therefore tax collections. But Finance Secretary Diokno is also counting on his proposed new taxes, such as a tax on single-use plastics, taxes on online purchases or digital subscriptions, and even by right-sizing government agencies to free up more funds. As to the debt level, Diokno says the goal is a gradual reduction down to 60% of the national output, although that's a level considered comfortable in global standards, although far higher than our pre-pandemic debt level. But the government is targeting to borrow locally, more locally than for internationally to limit exposure on foreign exchange risks. Back to you, Pia.
Melissa Lopez there reporting. The Japanese government is hopeful the Marcos administration will continue to do its part in strengthening bilateral relations on defense, trade, and infrastructure projects in the next decade. Our Tristan Odalo reports.
From the Russian invasion of Ukraine, disputes in the South China Sea, and the tension in the East China Sea, Japan is taking a strong stand against efforts to change the status quo by force or shake the foundations of international order in the region. During the 68th anniversary of Japan's self-defense forces, Japanese Ambassador Koshikawa Kazuhiko says they are committed to peace and stability in the region and team up with reliable partners, including the Philippines, in terms of maritime security. Under the Duterte administration, Tokyo transferred 5 DC-90 aircraft in 2018 and signed a deal so that 4 air surveillance radar systems can help improve the country's monitoring system.
The Japanese government strongly expects to strengthen defense cooperation with the Philippines' new administration under the leadership of President Marcos and coming Defense Secretary Faustino in order to achieve a free and open Indo-Pacific based on the rule of law.
Apart from defense cooperation, the Japanese government also eyes to improve ties in other areas such as diplomacy, economy, and culture.
Japan is a top investor for the Philippines, one of the top traders, and the top ODA partners of the Philippines.
Defense Officer in charge Jose Faustino Jr. also reiterates the country's position, working closely with Japan.
Through the years, the Philippines has found Japan to be a reliable partner in pursuing regional and global peace, security, and development. That despite the pandemic, our defense and military engagements or activities have continued to flourish.
The Japanese government has also invited President Bongbong Marcos to visit Japan and discuss with Prime Minister Kishida the overall bilateral relations of the two countries. Tristan Odalo, CNN Philippines.
More headlines when we come back. A decision is out on the appeal of online news Rappler head Maria Ressa and former researcher over their cyber libel conviction. Plus, a new battle is ahead for Manny Pacquiao, who has committed to an exhibition match with an online personality. Details straight ahead. You're watching Newsnight. 2 days after meeting with the president, health officials are looking at holding national vaccination days again. The country has yet to vaccinate 77 million people and reach the 70% booster coverage. Health officials say President Marcos has instructed them to double down on meeting target numbers. While Caroline Bonkin explains why redefining fully vaccinated is still on the table.
This mom has accompanied her daughter to get COVID-19 booster on Friday. After battling COVID-19, she wants her family to get up-to-date vaccines.
When I got COVID, bumalik yung asthma ko after 12 years. So it's really hard for me. I don't want them to get sick then, to feel that.
She doesn't mind if government decides to include a booster shot on top of the primary doses to say that a person is fully vaccinated.
Oh yes. COVID is still here Nag-aano pa siya tawag doon, nag-mutate pa
In a meeting on Wednesday, health officials discussed redefining what being fully vaccinated is with the president. The health spokesperson says consultations and studies are still needed. John Carlo has no problem if the president approves the proposal.
Okay naman sa akin kasi parang pag ginawa ng requirements ng gobyerno yan, wala na tayong magagawa. Tsaka yung meron din akong lolo, fully vaccinated siya tapos meron siyang first dose, second dose. Okay naman.
But Danilo is not, saying the public shouldn't be obligated to get boosted.
Yun nga po inaano namin, ba't kailangan pa ng ng booster. Kaya na na-obligate yung mga tao kasi requirement sa trabaho, requirement sa school. Kaya napipilitan ng magpa-booster.
Official data shows 40 million eligible Filipinos remain without booster. More or less 200,000 people are getting vaccinated daily since March.
Kung ganyan lang po ang nakukuha natin per day, hindi natin naabutin ang ating target with our set timelines.
Recent DOH survey shows the top reasons why booster vaccinations have plateaued and didn't even reach 50% in any region. First, low COVID-19 cases in recent months gave many people confidence in just having 2 doses. Second, because booster shot is also not required to get jobs or for local travel.
That's also part of what we are doing right now on how we can be able to address this kind of issues.
She stresses the importance of vaccines in preventing hospitalization as laboratories find more Omicron subvariant BA.5 cases that's more transmissible and likely to cause reinfection. Caroline Bonkin, CNN Philippines.
In China, the capital, Beijing, becomes the first city to require people to get vaccinated for COVID-19. Beginning July 11th, individuals will be required to show proof of inoculation to enter libraries, museums, cinemas, gyms, stadiums, and other fitness and leisure venues. Officials say this is to prevent the spread of the newly detected BA.5.2 Omicron subvariant. In the United States, a study finds 1 in 8 patients hospitalized for COVID-19 had weak immune system. This means over 12% of those treated in facilities were immunocompromised. Researchers say the new data suggests a layered approach to prevention, including access to antivirals and vaccination. A sigh of relief for motorists who can finally expect cheaper prices at the pump. The Energy Department says fuel firms will slash prices by up to 6 pesos next week. If implemented, this will be the second highest rollback this year. Energy officials say factors driving oil prices down include the lockdown in Shanghai, China, interest hikes in different countries, and a looming recession. Authorities are stepping up efforts against the unauthorized use of blinkers, or in the vernacular, wang-wang. George Quiles tells us the police are working to file complaints against vehicle owners seen illegally using emergency sirens.
This video posted by Senator J.V. Ejercito has created a buzz on social media, pointing out the abuse in the use of sirens and blinkers to avoid traffic jams.
We have already identified yung tao kung sino po siya. We are just getting all po yung CCTV to see kung makuha po namin conduction stickers po. We already went to yung dealer po ng Rolls-Royce to see who is the owner of that vehicle po.
If they are able to get sufficient pieces of evidence, the police will file a complaint against the owner of the vehicle before the Land Transportation Office. In the Philippines, only police vehicles, ambulances, and fire trucks are allowed to use sirens and blinkers during emergency situations. But it seems that some motorists use this for their own convenience and entitlement on the streets. Based on the PNP Highway Patrol Group's data, they have recorded over 900 violators of the law from November 2021 to June 2022. The PNP HPG reveals violators of the law are not just civilians, but also government agencies that establish their own motorcycle units. Worse, some even underwent training with the HPG.
Ito po na naggaling po sa training namin. And of course, kala they assume that pwede magkabit ng blinkers siren. Pwede lang po magbigay ng escorts ay yung HPG, PSPG po, and PSG po. The rest, hindi po talaga pwede magbigay ng escorts or traffic assistance po.
Republic Act 4136 and Presidential Decree Number 96 penalizes the illegal use of sirens and blinkers. Penalties include payment of fines, suspension or revocation of licenses, and imprisonment. George Cahiles, CNN Philippines.
The Court of Appeals upholds a lower court ruling convicting online news group Rappler CEO Maria Ressa and former writer Reynaldo Santos Jr. of cyber libel. The CA denied their appeal against the June 2020 decision of the Manila Regional Trial Court, which stemmed from a 2012 news article about businessman Wilfredo Keng's alleged connection to illegal activities. 8 months and 20 days were added to Ressa and Santos's maximum jail time of 6 years. The two journalists say they will pursue all legal remedies, including bringing the case to the Supreme Court for review. Another online news organization challenging a government order blocking its website, Bulatlat, which had been linked to communist rebels, appeals to the courts. Its constitutional freedom is at stake. Anjo Alimario reports.
Journalism is not terrorism. Journalists from different news organizations show their support for alternative news site Bulatlat, and in nullifying the order of the National Telecommunications Commission blocking over 20 websites. Former National Security Advisor Hermogenes Esperon asked NTC to block selected websites allegedly linked to communist terrorists. He used as basis the Anti-Terrorism Council's resolutions designating CPP and PANDF as terrorists. But today, online news site Bulatlat is taking the fight to the court.
Hayaan nyo yung medyang gawin ang kanyang tungkulin. At hindi dapat ituring na terorismo yung paglalathala ng ibang grupo na taliwas sa narrative ng mga nakaupo sa kapangyarihan.
They argue NTC has no power to block websites without a court order.
Even if it does has the power, and we dispute that it has the power, it's a patent violation of their constitutional rights to freedom of expression, free press, and then free speech, as well as their right to due process under the Philippine Constitution.
The blocking measure, the news organization points out, is nothing but censorship.
If they can get away with this action, then it's a slippery slope. We start with the journalists, and then who's next? That would be human rights organizations, defenders, ordinary activists, ordinary citizens.
The National Union of Journalists of the Philippines warns that if there's no pushback, the same thing can happen again.
There are critical reports. There are people who are, let's say, critical of the government and its policies. Pero hindi naman yun pagbangga sa gobyerno necessarily. That doesn't mean na gusto natin bumagsak yung gobyerno.
Bulatlat is seeking a stay order to immediately unblock the access to its website. Anjo Alimario, CNN Philippines.
An official from the National Security Council stresses that the National Task Force to End Communism, or NTF-LCAC, will not be abolished. Deputy National Security Advisor designate Romel Banlawi says the NTF-LCAC will continue to exist and be enhanced. He says the Marcos administration appreciates the successes of the Anti-Communist Task Force, but he notes the NTF-LCAC met on Thursday to discuss possible improvements amid criticism and red tagging concerns.
Sabi nga, there are many rooms for improvement and we are ready to listen to all stakeholders. Ano? Kaya kung may mga observations kayo about the implementation of LCAC, lalong-lalo na kung may mga nakikita kayong abuses arising from the implementation of LCAC, please let the government know that. Kasi naging image ng LCAC ay na-associate siya sa red tagging. Pero ang LCAC po is more than red tagging issue. Napakaliit na aspeto lang po yan.
A non-government organization led by former Vice President Leni Robredo is studying legal action against a former official of the NTF-ELCAC. Robredo's Angat Buhay is crying foul over red tagging attacks made by Lorraine Badoy, former spokesperson of the Anti-Communist Task Force. Badoy claims the people behind Angat Buhay are from the Communist Party's armed wing, the New People's Army. She also says a so-called Leni Youth Group is supposedly recruiting members to the communist movement. Angat Buhay described these claims as utterly baseless and completely false. The group vowed they will not allow efforts against them to prosper, saying the time to stand up to fake news is now. In other news, 2 people are dead after an elevator collapsed at a building in Makati City here in Metro Manila. The tragedy happened before dawn at the Burgundy Corporate Tower on Hilpuyat Avenue. 2 others were injured. The victims were maintenance workers repairing the elevator. Makati police say the elevator from the 38th floor suddenly plunged to the basement. 2 workers were on top of the elevator car while 2 others were waiting on the 6th floor. The victims' bodies have been retrieved while their employer is coordinating with authorities. Management of the building refused to comment on the incident. The investigation is still ongoing. Up next on Newsnight, looks like Manny Pacquiao is not done with boxing just yet. He has an exhibition match set for this year. Plus, we give you a look at the list of songs you can expect in BTS rapper J-Hope's solo album. Keep it here on CNN Philippines.
We have the power to protect Mother Earth, keeping it cleaner and greener, to preserve our
Welcome back to CNN Philippines, recapping today's biggest story. Former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has died after being shot in Nara, Japan. Some remarkable moments from the late politician. Abe was the first head of state to visit the Philippines during the Duterte administration. He also paid a courtesy call on the former president in his home in Davao City. Sports fans remember Abe for his appearance at the 2016 Rio Olympics. He dressed up as popular video game character Mario for the closing ceremony, where the event was passed to Japan as its next host nation. Abe was the country's longest-serving prime minister. He was 67 years old. Making a buzz in the sports world, tennis icon Rafael Nadal wraps up his Wimbledon campaign early after he tore his abdominal muscle. The Spanish athlete withdrew just a day before the semis, meaning his supposed opponent, Nick Kyrgios, is now finals bound. Cameron Norrie and defending champ Novak Djokovic will go head-to-head for the other finals spot. And boxing legend Manny Pacquiao is set to enter the ring again soon. The sport's only 8-division champion is coming out of retirement to face South Korean YouTube star and martial artist DKU. The exhibition match happens December 10th. And the Filipinos look to stretch their winning streak to 3 with an AFF Women's Championship game versus Malaysia at the Rizal Memorial Stadium in Manila at 7 tonight. Team captain Tanay Anis talked to CNN Philippines Sports Desk about keeping their momentum.
This is a really grueling schedule with a game every other day, which a lot of us have not experienced before. But I also think that it's really great to see that we have such a deep roster and that we're able to put in whoever, and everyone has been stepping up and, you know, performing as asked. I think that if we're just able to stay focused in and supporting each other and lifting each other up, that, you know, we'll be fine through those games and hopefully on to the next stage.
The Philippines is currently on top of Group A play after beating Australia and Singapore. Now, for BTS ARMYs, we're finding out more about J-Hope's highly anticipated first solo album. The K-pop rapper unveiled the track list for Jack in the Box, composed of 10 titles. Korean website Naver says the album will have 2 lead singles, the first being the recently released rock hit More and Arson, which is yet to arrive. The record drops July 15th. And that is it for now. Join me again on News.ph at 7 p.m. I'm Pia Ontiveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
This program is brought to you by
This program is rated PG. It contains themes and scenes which may not be
from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's no surprise that people are worried another disease is making headlines. Since May of 2022, cases of monkeypox have been spreading around the world. The World Health Organization reported more than 500 cases in at least 26 countries. But should this be a cause for concern? On the program today, we'll talk more about the disease, what we can expect, and preventive measures we can take as early as now. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome to MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. As cases of monkeypox continue to increase, our guests are here today to tell us what we need to know about monkeypox. With us is Dr. Maria Rona M. Bergantin. She's a virologist and infectious disease specialist from the University of Santo Tomas Hospital. We're also joined by Dr. John Wong, who is an epidemiologist and the senior technical advisor of Epimetrics. Now, before we delve into monkeypox, let's first talk about smallpox. Now, it's a virus of the same family. We could say that they're cousins. And this is what spread around the world years ago. This was obviously eradicated. In terms of smallpox, Dr. John, why was this a problem 40, 50 years ago?
Smallpox had a very high
case fatality rate, no, of every 10 cases, no, 3 people would die. No? So there was a worldwide vaccination campaign, no, to try to eradicate it.
And many survivors of smallpox would have permanent scars over large areas of their body, particularly on their faces. And some were even left blind. But the disease was eventually eradicated, and it remains the only infectious disease to achieve this distinction. Now, Dr. Rona, in terms of control, how were we able to eradicate smallpox?
One thing that is quite unique about smallpox is that human is the only known reservoir. So it's really easy to control the infection compared to monkeypox, because up until now, the scientists are not quite sure what the exact reservoir of the virus is.
The health sector works on producing newer vaccines, diagnostics, and antiviral agents in case smallpox does reappear. Now, the global response in eradicating this disease can be useful in preventing and controlling monkeypox today. Dr. John, let's talk about now monkeypox. Why is it here now? Why is it being talked about now in the news? And why is it likened to smallpox?
Monkeypox comes from the family of viruses called orthopox viruses. No? This is the same family as cowpox and smallpox. No? It was only identified in monkeys, but the reservoir are rodents, no, in Western and Central Africa. For most of its history, it has been limited to those 2 areas. It's now in the news because this is the largest outbreak outside of Africa.
A lot of studies show that monkeypox, although a cousin of smallpox, it shows that this is less severe. Dr. Rona, walk us through some of the symptoms as well as the progression of symptoms. What does monkeypox look like, and how long does it take for the virus to show in a person?
The characteristic of monkeypox is that, of course, similar to smallpox as well as the chickenpox, which is not really related to monkeypox, is that they are characterized with skin lesions. And these skin lesions typically evolve over a few weeks, or rather, coming from the WHO as a reference site, it says that for monkeypox, it takes around 2 to 4 weeks as an evolution. So during the time of the incubation period, the patient, they say, is not yet infective. So the patient is not transmitting or shedding any virus. But once the prodrome, or the symptoms, let's say the fever, the flu-like symptoms, as well as the lymphadenopathy sets in, and the rashes also come in now, that is the time when the patient becomes more infectious and the virus is transmissible.
Let's shed some more information about this, especially on how this can be transmitted, because basically anyone can be a carrier of this. Anyone can be the one spreading this. Let's talk about that.
So the main mode of transmission still relies on the fact that there could be close skin contact. Okay, so that's coming from the lesions, and also, of course, through droplets, respiratory droplets.
Now, ultimately, the virus is not expected to create a similar scenario to COVID-19, but we should still take monkeypox seriously. Nations are taking extra precautions to prevent its spread. Dr. Rona, tell us a little bit more about these measures.
Typically, the wearing of masks, observance of hand hygiene, these are quite similar to the preventive measures we should be observing for monkeypox, because again, they are closely transmitted through secretions coming from the respiratory tract, and more importantly, coming from the skin secretion. So if we wear gloves when we are attending to our sick patients or those who are really ill, and then we wear masks, then definitely that can aid in preventing the spread. Do not forget, of course, hand washing. This is very, very important.
Now, Dr. Rona, gaano kalala ang monkeypox sa isang tao who gets infected today?
Coming from reports in Africa, mostly in Western Africa and Central Africa, the case fatality rate is somewhere between 3% to 10% with monkeypox. And the severity is more in those who have been infected from the virus, which comes from the Central African region, compared rather to the Western African region, which I think is the one which is being disseminated in outside Africa.
We know that smallpox, there was a vaccine that protected a lot of people and which eventually led to its eradication. But how many Filipinos are vaccinated for this today?
I think vaccination with the smallpox vaccine ended in the 80s, no? Mainly in Africa. No? I'm not sure about when it ended here in the Philippines, no? But for sure, no, most Filipinos would not have immunity to smallpox, no, due to vaccination. and not even through natural infection. No? So because there's some cross immunity with monkeypox, the lack of immunity against smallpox also makes Filipinos vulnerable to monkeypox.
Many of the symptoms of monkeypox can be similar to that of chickenpox or varicella, a common childhood illness. When we return, we'll talk about the differences and what you can do to protect yourself. We're your partner in healthcare. Keep it here on MedTalk Health Talk. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez and welcome back to MedTalk Health Talk. An outbreak of the monkeypox has sparked concern, but health officials report that the virus can be contained with vaccines and proper safety measures. Many of its symptoms might be confused for that of chickenpox, a very common illness here, especially here in the Philippines. Dr. Rona, earlier on the show, you mentioned how some of the symptoms of monkeypox, yung pagkakaroon ng bulutong tubig, some blister-like lesions, is similar to that of chickenpox. Meron bang way for a parent especially to be able to distinguish kung chickenpox ba ito or monkeypox na ba ito just by looking at the symptoms?
Initial symptomatology, not much probably, but then what is remarkable about monkeypox and is definitely not yet reported in chickenpox is the presence of the kulani or the lymphadenopathy, as we have mentioned earlier on. Now, with regards to the skin lesions of chickenpox or our bulutong tubig, typically this appears on the face and in the trunk. So in monkeypox, typically you see this in the face, but not much on the trunk, but more on the extremities, so hands and feet, including the palms and the sole. And also, when we talk of chickenpox, if you're going to scrutinize or look at the lesions closely, they appear at different stages. Unlike when we see monkeypox, isang particular portion ng katawan, pare-pareho yung itsura ng skin lesions nila.
In terms of monkeypox, how bad can it get? Kailangan bang ma-hospital ang tao kapag sila yung na-diagnose with monkeypox, or is this self-limiting?
Definitely, they have to isolate themselves. If we're going to follow the recommendations of the authority, 21 days of isolation. But definitely, if we're going to have monkeypox, this needs to be reported.
We've established it is not as deadly as smallpox, but is whether or not a person dies, ito lang ba ang qualification, Dr. John, para bigyan ng pansin ang isang virus?
This is a new virus to most of the world, except in Africa. So people don't have immunity to it. Second, even though most cases, the majority of cases are mild, sometimes the skin lesions leave some marks that can be disfiguring. So people should pay attention to what the public health officials are saying. We're still in a good place that we still have not identified any cases. So for now, the public should be more concerned about COVID and trying to get vaccinated or boosted.
There was a vaccine for smallpox before. Is this the same vaccines that we need to be aware of in order to protect ourselves from monkeypox?
The chickenpox vaccine is different from what we hear about monkeypox vaccine. So the ones which protected individuals in Africa or almost the rest of the world for the spread of the monkeypox is the smallpox vaccine, rather the vaccinia vaccine, which is used for smallpox. But when we talk of the chickenpox vaccine, this is coming from the varicella virus, which is, of course, again, a different family. And for the varicella virus vaccine, this is widely available, can be given to children and also adults who have not yet received the immunization. But when we talk of the smallpox vaccine, which is being utilized in certain sectors to protect individuals against monkeypox, so this is very limited only for selected individuals and not for wide public use.
Right now, monkeypox, there are no cases of monkeypox here in the Philippines. But do you predict in the future that it is only a matter of time for it to arrive here in the Philippines?
Health authorities in Europe discovered it. There were already about 200 cases. So they're thinking this is just the tip of the iceberg. That community transmission has been going on for some time. And since we're not testing for monkeypox for travelers, possible for it to enter the Philippines unnoticed. It's still not cost effective to test people for monkeypox for incoming travelers. The most we can do is to ask about travel history and look for fever or a rash for incoming travelers. But because of those, it's possible that it could enter the country unnoticed.
Whether it's monkeypox, chickenpox, or COVID-19, there are steps that we can take to protect from these contagious diseases. More on this when we return. Your health is our mission here on MedTalk Health Talk. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez and welcome back to MedTalk Health Talk. While cases of the monkeypox virus continue to spread, health experts say that the risk to the general public remains low. We should still take precautions in order to reduce our risks of catching the virus or any other infectious diseases for that matter. Dr. Rona, let's remind our viewers again what is effective in controlling infection, whether it be for COVID-19 or for monkeypox.
Always continue hand washing. That is very, very important. It prevents, of course, the spread of the disease. Not just COVID, not just monkeypox, but other viruses and bacteria as well. When we're dealing with monkeypox as well as with COVID, then we use the mask. So please do not put our guards down because these are the ones that have been protecting us over the past 2 years to almost 3 years of the pandemic.
When it comes to monkeypox, what kind of isolation time are we looking at here?
21 days as against to the shortened isolation period that we have nowadays when it comes to COVID-19. And this is the duration of isolation somehow applies to patients with chickenpox because our audience need to know that as long as there is a crust in the skin lesions of these patients with either monkeypox or chickenpox, they are still transmitting or shedding the virus.
Now, Dr. John, speaking of protocols, with travel restrictions easing, how can the Philippines better screen for viruses such as monkeypox as well as COVID-19?
One of the most effective means of preventing outbreaks of monkeypox is to provide information to the public, like what we're doing now, what it is, how to identify it, what are the symptoms. And when people have this information, they can either self-report or report people they know in their family members who have these symptoms.
There are some reports of people trying to look for a smallpox vaccine. There are some people who say that they need to be updated with their varicella vaccine in order to protect themselves from monkeypox in case it does enter here in the Philippines. Let's try and clarify the air. Let's give them some good information so they could make decisions better.
So with regards to the commercial availability of monkeypox vaccine, it's not that commercially available. In fact, in other countries, they are only given to a limited number of people, most especially the ones who are working in laboratories or let's say in healthcare units where there is a high risk possibility of exposing themselves to monkeypox. Now, with regards to varicella virus vaccine being given to prevent, again, monkeypox, so again, to emphasize, they are a different family. So when you update your varicella vaccine, that means you're going to have yourselves protected from varicella, but not from monkeypox.
Now, before we let both of you go, do you have any additional tips for our audience which they can use in order to protect themselves from monkeypox? I'll start first with Dr. John.
The most important thing that they can do is just continue listening to the public health officials, what they're saying, whether or not there are cases here in the Philippines. However, it's the public health officials who have to pay attention to the introduction of cases here in the Philippines. We need better surveillance and better information to the public.
Okay. And of course, Dr. Rona, do you have any advice for the viewers?
Probably one thing that I have to emphasize, which has not been tackled a bit earlier on, is the avoidance of eating meat coming from other countries, which are, of course, not authorized by our health sector. Because one of the means of spread also of monkeypox is through the bushmeat, and that also needs to be looked into. When we talk of exotic meat coming from other countries, which of course we would want to taste, and these are not authorized to be imported or brought inside our country, then definitely it has not been passed through the assurance that they are free from infection. And because games, fowls, and also animals which are consumed in those areas coming from Africa or from those areas where these monkeypox virus is, then they should be regulated.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maria Rona M. Bergantin and Dr. John Wong, for being with us today. We appreciate your time and your expert insights. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and thank you for watching MedTalk Health Talk. We'll see you again next time.